opportunity to work and reshape the industry and how to create a sustainable logistics going forward. I'll give you a little bit some of the macro numbers there. About 3.5 billion tons of the CO2 emission emitted from the global logistic every year. That is a sizable amount. And if you look at that 3%, or 105 million tons of the global CO2 emissions is actually coming from the international shipping lines. And out of that 105 million tons, 34 tons of CO2 directly emitted from A.P. Moller Maersk vessels, A.P. Moller Maersk operations. So very significant contributions to the global greenhouse. So 34% that we contributed to the global greenhouse of the international shipping. We consume about 10 plus millions tons of fuels by the A.P. Moller Maersk fleet. And the emissions of it is basically contributes 90% on the scope 1 emissions that we have there. The scope 1 emission is basically through our own operations. It's some things that we control and operate. Next. So we made a pledge. What we can do to make our planet greener. Not by 100 years from now, not by 50 years from now, but during our lifetime. During the time where we can actually make an impact without passing on to the next generations. So in 2022, we started a plan to to accelerate our decarbonizations. Earlier, by 2018, before the sustainability was very high in everybody's agenda, not even discussed basically in the UN. We already made a pledge that we wanted to be a carbon neutral company by 2050. At that point of time, we have no idea how to achieve that. But as we progress through the study, as we basically collaborate with a lot of stakeholders, as we know somehow how to achieve that, we fast forward that ambition that we wanted to be a carbon neutral company by 2040. Bring forward that ambition by 10 years. And 2023, we will have our first vessels, that is ultra large vessels that will be powered by the green methanols. Already by 2022, this year, we have tested on running the small ship that is in the transatlantic, running by the green methanols, and that is become our proof of concept of something that is even much larger. And since then, give us a lot of learning on how do we use this going forward in an even larger vessels. So we have ordered 16,000 TEUs vessels that will run purely on the green methanol, and they will be operational and in fleet by 2024. Not 10 years from now, not 20 years from now, but 2 years, 1.5 years from now, we will be seeing a completely green vessels sailing on our ocean. In 2030, the industry-leading green customers offering across the supply chains, and we should be able to basically offer some solutions to our customers, those that have that they will opt for the green shipping solution. And by 2040, we will give no option for all the customers. All of our cargo that is moving on the sea, land, and also rail will have to be carbon neutrals. There is an ambition that is bold. There is an ambition that is tall. There is an ambition that we that some part of it we don't have the answer yet. But I think we are very confident we will find a solution as we pass through years. Next. When we talk about decarbonization shipping, it talks about how do we find a green fuel? Because similar like the bus, right? The major source of the greenhouse is actually on the fossil fuel that is burned in the combustions of the engine. So when we talk about the green shipping, it's about finding the alternative to the current bunker prices. Sorry, bunkers fuel. Some of you may have seen in the media, in some of the literatures, that there are few school of thought of what will be considered as a green shipping, right? Some of the shipping line have chosen to have an LNG powered vessels because they believe that the LNG they do not have the sulfur, right? And therefore will basically have much less CO2 compared to the other fossil fuel. Maersk is basically take a completely different step because we believe that LNG is mostly methane and or CH4 that is also part of the greenhouse gas. And the famous one is, of course, the CO2, right? That is, unfortunately, based on the study, traps about 86 times more heat in the atmosphere than the same amount of CO2 over the course of 20 years. So with that, we opted to have a different path. And in Maersk, we are looking at biodiesels and the green methanols as the way forwards of our green fuel. And in the longer terms, we are looking at e-ammonia as the cheapest zero carbon options for e-fuel. We are not there yet, but the methanol is already here, is already operational. However, it's actually not easy. It's easier said than done. Changing the fuel is not about just changing from the bunkers into the methanols. I'll give you an illustration about the electric car. It's not about changing from benzene, solar into electric car. Right? If you use the standard car with the gasoline and diesel, the SPBU is everywhere. When you are running out of fuel in the toll road, you can just stop by and gas up into the SPBU, to the gas stations, and 20 minutes, voila, or 15 minutes, then full, and then you are off to go again. But you are in the electric car, you need to build charging stations, right? And similar also with the vessel, when you are changing the fuel from the traditional bunkers into the methanols, what you need to have is a methanol fueling stations. So it required a lot of infrastructure. It's not as easy as, okay, now we are changing the fuel from petrols into LNG. Now we are changing the car from diesels into electric car. The infrastructure need to be fixed, and this is where Maersk also works with various stakeholders to make sure that the infrastructure is also available. Not only that is helping us to change, but we are also help of reshaping the entire industry. So hopefully, the work that we are doing and that we are currently undertaking will yield us fruits and meeting our very ambitious target by 2040. We completely decarbonize our supply chains. Another element when we talk about decarbonizing shipping and the supply chain is, beside the ship, is also the land operations, right? And this is talking about the terminals. So another important aspect of the operation of decarbonizing our entire supply chain is also decarbonizing terminals and landside transports. Our terminals is basically accounted about 61% of our scope 2 emission that we saw on the previous slide. And this is a lot. And where does it come from? It's basically come from the fuel that we are using, and also from the electricity sourcing that we are using to power our terminals. And we wanted to claim leadership in decarbonization within the terminal industry and achieve zero carbon or carbon neutral by 2040, similar pledge that we made also on our sitting business. And by 2030, we are committed to have delivered 70% absolute reductions of our greenhouse gas emission for the scope 1 and the scope 2 that you mentioned, that we saw in the previous slide. We also have other supporting companies that is working in the shipping sectors that also emitting the greenhouses. Svitzer, for instance, is also actively actively operating in Asia Pacific, not in Indonesia. They are also emitting the greenhouses, and we also have made a pledge by 2040. All of our operation in the Svitzer, it's actually will be carbon neutral by 2040, and we have started already now in 2021, where the company took important steps towards green product offerings, following successful pilots that we did in the UK. The other elements is then touching upon the last miles, the other part of the supply chains, the land side transportations. It's also the how do you operate the contract logistic in the warehouse, the air freights, and also the land side transportations. Our land side footprint is currently contributing about 5.7% of our total greenhouse gas footprint. It is relatively small, but a growing amount of number. So it's something that we also need to look at and pay attention. In 2021, last year, we have set up an inland decarbonization program with the aim to serve our customers with end-to-end decarbonization logistic solutions. When I came back to Indonesia in 2019, I have decided that all of our own operated warehouse need to be carbon neutrals. Long before the company make a pact that every new operated warehouse, self-operated warehouse will need to have the platinum standard when it comes to the energy efficiency. But it did before, it was the global instructions. I have a warehouse that is just not far from here in Cakung. It's called Damco Warehouse Indonesia, that is fully sustainable, run with the solar panels. And mainly is some things that we did in 2019 to basically as a trial to see if it is more making sense for us both economically to run a fully sustainable warehouse. And guess what? It makes sense. It makes sense from the environmental perspective. At the same time, also it makes sense from the economic perspective. And it also makes sense from the customers, because more and more our customers really paying attention on how they source their suppliers when it comes into green supply chains. So each of these have a very different solution in terms of decarbonization. So warehouse will have their own paths into how decarbonize their footprints. And also our inland transport will also need to find a complete different solutions on how we decarbonize our inland transports in Indonesia. And one way that we're looking at it is basically through the electric trucks. Currently, we are working with one of the European companies to at this point of time, which I cannot disclose, still in the very confidential basis, to potentially deploy the first electric trucks in Indonesia that is running 100% with the electric powered source of power. Next, that is equally important is basically on the safety. And for those that are in STIP knows exactly how dangerous it is to work on the board of the ship, right? So I'm not only staying in the office. I'm not that I've been sailing before, but I've been on board of the ship, sailing from one port to another, and I've seen the operations of the vessels that both on the sea as well as alongside of the terminals, they are full of risks. right? And safety is something that we need to put at the highest standard, because nobody should get hurt while we are working at MERS. So there are few things that we are doing when it comes to safety, and they are divided into 4 principles. The first one is that to lead with care. And the pictures that you see over there on the right side is it's basically the managements that is going into Gemba. It is a compulsory for all managements in MERS at managerial position to walk down in any of the facility that we have, be it on the land and the sea, and then witness themselves an area of improvement that they need to make. So the decision should not be made only behind the desk, but something that they should look at and pay attention, and continuously working at the Gemba and see what are the other colleagues doing at sea, at the warehouse, at the transports, at the customs brokerages, at the terminals operators, and so on and so forth. The second is to learn and adapt from the critical risk projects, including some of the accidents and the fatalities that we have. We are not accident-free company.